Hello, everybody. Welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to go through the transits, planetary transits or movements going on, or Gochara, as they're known as in Sanskrit, for the month of May 2024. And keep in mind, this is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective. And it seemed like the overall theme for the month was healing from the inside out. So let's take a look at what's going on. A note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. And then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. So if you're new to Vedic astrology, Jyotish, or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the subject are in the concepts playlist. They can all be found there. I organize all my videos into playlists, so they're easier to find in terms of topic. And also, wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means that there's a teaching video on the subject if you'd like to learn more about that concept. And again, I'm all about the playlists here, so these playlists may be particularly helpful to you if you're learning Jyotish concepts. I have a Graha's planets playlist, a Bhava's houses playlist, a yoga's combinations playlist, and there are others as well. Also, if you're looking for more charts of famous people and places and moments, I published in the last few weeks or so a video titled "The Birth Chart Archive List 2024." So that'll give you a rundown of the different birth charts that I've analyzed, and also the video that you can find them in. So again, it's kind of an index for birth charts for my channel. And then for this particular talk, it's an interpretive talk, so I incorporate a lot of different concepts. So these are some of the videos that would be especially helpful if you're a beginner. So North, South, and East Indian style charts. I do covered Western style charts in that video as well, but it's not in the title. Introduction to navigating a birth chart. The lugna, also known as the ascendant, rising sign, or first house. Introduction to the constellations or rashis. Constellation or rashi categories. Planetary aspects, directional strength or digbala, natural, benefic, and malefic planets or grahas, planet friends and enemies or graha, mitra, shatru, planetary war or graha, yuddha, planetary combustion or asta, planetary exaltation, debilitation, nakshatras or lunar mansions, and also bhavat, bhavam, house of the house concept. Also, I'll be covering a few different yogas, including pravraja yoga, sarpa yoga, parivartana yoga, and saraswati yoga. So let's get into it. Okay, so let's look at the dates in which things in the sky are moving so we can kind of get an overall view of the month. So May 1st, it was a couple days ago, Jupiter entered Taurus or Vrishabha. So that's a big deal because it's a slow mover. And we'll talk more about what that will entail for the next year because Jupiter takes about a year to transit each sign. May 3rd today, Jupiter goes combust, actually in a few minutes, I think. So combustion is known as asta in Sanskrit. May 5th, Venus enters Bharani nakshatra. And at the same time, Jupiter leaves Sandhi. May 5th, Saturn has an exact aspect on Sun, and there's a new moon in Bharani nakshatra. May 10th, Sun enters Krittika nakshatra, and Mercury enters Aries or Mesha. At the same time, it enters Ashwini nakshatra. And when Mercury moves, that also means that there's going to be an end of a Ketu 5-9 aspect. And May 13th, Saturn has an exact aspect on Venus. May 14th, Sun enters Taurus. So it's in Sankranti, we call it a movement of signs per sun. And that same day, Mars enters Revati nakshatra. May 16th, Venus enters Krittika nakshatra. May 18th, Venus enters Taurus. And Mars crosses Rahu. May 21st, Mercury enters Bharani nakshatra. 22nd through 24th of May, Venus and Jupiter will be in planetary war or graha yuddha. May 23rd, there's going to be a full moon in Ardra nakshatra. That's in Scorpio. May 24th, the Sun enters Rohini nakshatra. May 27th, Saturn has an exact aspect on Mercury, and Venus enters Rohini nakshatra. May 29th, Mercury enters Krittika nakshatra. May 31st, Mercury enters Taurus, and we get K2 going 5-9 aspects away again. Then June 1st, Mars enters Aries and Ashwini at the same time, simultaneously. Okay, so let's talk about what all this means. Okay, so let's start off by looking at the sky patterns and how the sky pattern and how it's going to shift over the course of the month. So on the first slide or the first chart here on the left, this is the chart for May 1st, 2024. And I've oriented both of these charts that we have Aries or Mesha in the Lugna or the first house ascendant. The reason being is that this creates a natural zodiac chart. The natural zodiac, so when you put the first zodiac sign of Aries in the first house, it creates a natural zodiac, which is basically, you can kind of think of that as a birth chart for the whole world or humanity. Okay? So again, basically what I'm getting at here is collective energy. Okay, so the first chart here, you can see we have Sun exalted in the first house, and we also have Venus in the first house. The thing is that Venus is so close to the Sun that it's combust, what we call combust, or it's essentially eclipsed. It's so close to the Sun, you won't see Venus in the sky for a while until I think early to mid July. So Venus is gonna be combust for a while. The moon nakshatra here, or the lunar mansion is every night the moon travels to another nakshatra. There are 27 of these. And so the moon, as it travels from nakshatra to nakshatra through month, 27 days is essentially a lunar month, about 27 and a half days. So that's a way for counting the position and energy of the moon. So the moon nakshatra at this time is in Shravana nakshatra. And Shravana is symbolized by 3 footprints in the sand. It's also symbolized by an ear. So there's a lot of storytelling involved with this nakshatra. And so the moon, being in Shravana, could bring about like a lot of public storytelling, a lot of public conversation, that sort of thing. And also the moon is aspecting its own sign in the 4th house. So this could also be about, how are we going to develop or move, kind of end old stories and begin new stories. Yeah. Yeah. So the Dasha period, the planetary period at this time is Moon, Saturn, Mercury, Venus. So you can see the moon is quite prevalent here. So again, public stories, public lineage, oral traditions. Like, what are the stories we're going to tell ourselves and live moving forward? You also have Saturn here. Saturn is in its own sign, very strong. It's in Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra. Saturn is a planet that symbolizes things like destruction, chronic disease, death, you know, difficulties, delays, that sort of thing. So it's very strong right now. And it happens to be in the 11th house of clubs, groups, societies, and also income. I would think with this placement, though, since Saturn is in its own sign, I wouldn't be so concerned about income, but I would be concerned about clubs, groups, and societies possibly ending or turning over. Especially because we have the moon, you can see is in the position of the moon and Saturn, the position of moon and Saturn, we're getting a study sati here. So sadhisati, if you're not familiar with that concept, is a 7.5-year period where the moon transits the sign before, through, and after Saturn. And so since Saturn only switches signs every 2.5 years, 3 signs by 2.5 years is 7.5 years. Okay. And typically what happens during a sadhisati time is that there's a loss of um, long established support systems. Okay, so because we have Saturn here in Purva Bhadrapada in the 11th house, it's going to mean that there's a lot of loss of clubs, groups, societies, friends, that sort of thing. Okay. Associations, like more sort of secular outward associations, that sort of thing. We also have Mercury here in the Dasha sequence. Mercury's in the 12th house of loss and expenditures. So Mercury represents friends. It can also represent education. And Venus is here, but Venus is combust. So even though Venus is in the first house here, and the first house is the top diamond in the middle, and then because this is a North Indian style chart, And to find the other houses, you count counterclockwise. So if you count counterclockwise to where Venus and Sun are, up into that top triangle with Jupiter in it and a little two, the little two symbolizing not the second house, but the second constellation of Taurus. That Jupiter Taurus is the second house for this chart. Right. So you can see here, Moon and Venus are the planets of emotion. Saturn and Mercury are quite like kind of separatist type planets. Saturn for physical reasons and Mercury for mental reasons. So you can see that even through the Shah sequence, it's picking up on these energies of loss of friendships or friendships you're not seeing, clubs, groups, societies, possibly through education, students even. And so, like what I think of immediately, based on current events, is in the United States, we've been having a lot of protests at universities over affairs in the Middle East and university investments in, um, supporting different sides and of the warring groups in the Middle East and that sort of thing. And so, actually, we had a bunch of arrests this week. And students got arrested and they protested and they occupied buildings and they destroyed property and quite a few of them are, I guess, getting expelled now and they're canceling graduation ceremonies and that sort of thing. So you can see there that especially some of these students who got arrested and who got expelled from school, they, you know, in a flash moment, got removed from a bunch of, clubs, groups, societies that they've probably been associated with for at least a year, if not longer. Okay. But I don't know if the older, the senior students are going to be allowed to graduate or not or get their degree. So, it's all, who knows. But the other thing to note here is that you can assume, even though Jupiter, this is the first domain, Jupiter is not combust at this exact moment. Again, as I mentioned while I'm recording this on May 3rd, Jupiter is just about to go into combustion in a few minutes. So Jupiter and Venus will both be essentially combust for most of the month of May. Now, the thing is, Jupiter, and Venus are the two kind of considered the most benefic planets of the set of 9 in Vedic astrology, classic Vedic astrology. So Jupiter, I've mentioned, is in my mind kind of like Santa Claus, like very generous and giving gifts and compassionate and just, fair. And Venus is, and they're both diplomatic, and then Venus is like about social grace and diplomacy and friendship and you know, uh, being a charming hostess and that sort of thing. So these two planets are combust, and I have a whole video on combustion, but essentially, like in a nutshell, when a planet goes combust, you won't see the outer manifestations of the things that this planet symbolizes, but you will feel them more deeply internally. So right now, especially with, again, I keep going to these student protests because that's what's been kind of, those are the headlines that have been flashing in front of my eyes a lot in the last few days. And I think it fits the situation quite well, is that, yeah, I mean, you weren't getting a lot of, agreement or diplomacy for the most part. I mean, a couple of the universities, I think, found some way to make some sort of agreement with university administration, but, it completely went haywire, and then they called in police and made arrests and stuff like that. So, um, and also on May 1st, Jupiter, you can see Jupiter's in first degree sign of Taurus. That means Jupiter's unstable. And again, Jupiter represents things like justice and law. And it just passed from Aries. When it was in Aries for about 10 days before um, Jupiter crossed into Taurus, Jupiter was in a sign of Aries, and Aries was in a sign of or sorry, Jupiter was in the sign of Mars, and Mars was in the sign of Jupiter. So you had a parivartana or exchange of houses. So that meant that you can exchange these two planets. And the thing is, both of these are, fairly slow-moving planets. Um, and Jupiter has special aspects, so it actually aspects 3 other houses besides the one it's in, and Mars does the same. So when you switch them, it's like you basically get Jupiter and Mars all over the chart. So you're going to get a lot of legal issues popping up. Yeah. And so again, yeah, that fits with the, university student situation here. Um, yeah, so you can see like the sun is exalted here, so this is a very strong administration. The sun, I believe, is in Bharani nakshatra at this time in the beginning here. Bharani is all about like beginnings and endings. So, because it's symbolized by a womb, like the whole kind of major transition period of birthing a child, that sort of thing. But you can see Venus is combust here. So even though there's some attempt to ameliorate the situation, you're not seeing a lot of cooperation. And the thing is, Venus is in Ashwini nakshatra. Nakshatra is symbolized by the Kumara twins, who are the celestial healers. And there's a lot of sort of rescuing energy with Ashwini. So there's an attempt by administration, by a strong administration, to ameliorate the situation, but I think it's pretty much falling on deaf ears. um, yeah, so, you can see from all of this, especially with, Mercury in the 12th house and Saturn in the 11th house of clubs, group societies, and um, there was a lot of shakeup of relationships generally. The other thing is you have Mars aspecting the 7th house. You do have Venus aspecting its own sign in the 7th house. You have Sun there. So the Sun, again, the Sun represents government and authority, administration. Administration is trying to do what it can to salvage relationships, but again, that 7th house of relationships, the Lord of that 7th house is combust. So it's almost like no matter how hard you try, some relationships are going to be ending here. The other thing is that with Jupiter in the second house represents like oral communication. Um, and Jupiter represents again things like education, university, teachers, that sort of thing. And Jupiter is a planet of oral communication. And in the house of oral communication, you would typically expect a lot of oral communication. But while Jupiter's combust for the next month, Jupiter will be combust until I believe June 3rd. Um, It may be actually a lot of radio silence. It may not be a lot of talking because there was, clearly a lot of angry speech going on. But there may not be a lot of external communication or that sort of thing. Or the communication that happens is with close friends and family, that like the inner circle, because the second house can represent the inner circle. Um, so it might be again like, but Jupiter still. And Jupiter is in a nakshatra of Krittika. Krittika is a dual nakshatra, and Jupiter is a dual planet. So it's kind of like, how do we tread moving forward? The symbol of Krittika is the celestial leader of the army, so Kartikeya. So again, you're getting this like army, kind of law enforcement type energy. And again, but besides Kartikeya, the celestial healer, he was actually raised by various foster mothers. So it's kind of this love them or, or fight them type energy with Kritika, and Jupiter being a dual sign. It's kind of like, how do we, you know, how do we work this situation to find fairness? Like, do we fight, um, do we fight it or do we love it, try to, so there's a lot of confusion there. Um, yeah, and so again, I think for the next month or so, while Jupiter's combust, it's kind of like, how do we start picking up the pieces here? Because Jupiter still, even though Jupiter's in a dual nakshatra and that sort of thing, it is going to be moving out of Kritika, I believe June 12th or 13th. So while Jupiter's combust, it's kind of this trying to figure out how do we start healing the situation? Because Taurus here is whereas Aries, where Jupiter's been for the last year, is a fire sign and a movable fire sign. So a lot of like action and activities. Now it's shifted into Taurus, which is a fixed earth sign. So Jupiter for the next year is going to be all about getting grounded. A very different kind of platform from which Jupiter can function. Um, So again, Jupiter's the great benefic. Um, and so I see like, this next month or so is all about starting to heal, but deep within, starting with friends and family. How do we start there in terms of healing things? Again, there might be some not so much communication, like that might even be part of what needs to be healed is reestablishing communication if that's been lacking or lost, and seeing what we can recover from this. Yeah. So that's the start of the month. And then the second chart here is May 31st, 5:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, that's not so critical, I think, but again, I lined this up so we have the first constellation of Aries in the first house. But you can see there, you can see without knowing much astrology, you can see there's a big shift here, and you can see that all these different planets, the four planets, are lining up in the second house of Taurus. So the second house is going to be, really important. The second house represents things like it's an artastana, so it's a house of wealth. And you can see Jupiter's there, Venus is there, and even though they're combust, they're still benefics. So it's kind of like, how do we create, better infrastructure? How do we recreate wealth? Like, all the property that was damaged on these universities, like, how do we clean that up and repair that? Also, so you have four planets, Sun, Jupiter, Mercury, Venus in the second house. That's a pravraja yoga. That's a combination of planets that indicates a life focus. So we can see the focus is there just from that. Also with Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, and this all together in the same, not only the same house, but particularly the second house, it's going to be a lot about like healing, you know, it's a saraswati yoga, which indicates things like education and arts and learning. So how do we heal this, and also since the second house represents oral communication, like how do we heal communications and rebuild universities, among other things. But also the second house represents things like family, inner circle. Um, yeah. So, but let me go through a little more systematically. So the moon in the second chart is in Purva, and you can see the sun, Saturn, and moon are almost in the same degree in Purva Bhadrapada. So there's going to be an emotional storm here. I mean, for sure, in clubs, groups, and societies. So even though there's an attempt to heal things, there's going to be a pushback. That's what I'm seeing here. The Jyotish sequence for the second chart is Jupiter, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus. So that's really great. Jupiter, Venus, those are two great benefics. The only problem, though, is that they're combust. So you won't see that yet. So again, there's still going to be issues, social unrest, I would say, um, at this, towards the end of the month. Although things are, at least the intentions are moving towards a positive direction. I don't think you're going to see healing yet, but at least the seeds are being planted of reestablishing positive communication. Let's see. And again, because the moon is right about to cross Saturn here, do get sadhisati again. So in both charts, beginning and end of the month, you still get a sadhisati, so a loss of pretty important support system. So especially for like the students who are expelled and stuff like that. I mean, that's probably pretty big, right? I would assume it is. Maybe it's not, but I would assume it is. In the second chart, the other thing that happens is that um, where are we? We also get a Kala Sarpa yoga. It's a planetary combination where all of the planets are on one side of the Rahu Ketu axis or the other. The thing is, I typically will take Kala Sarpa yoga, or at least think that there's some Kala Sarpa like energy when only the Saturn and Moon are on one side and all the other planets on the other. The reason being is Saturn is the slowest moving planet. So in some cases you would not get you would not get color sarpa yoga for decades, and the moon moves so fast, and so for the opposite reason, the moon moves so fast that it's like skipping through, that it's like, you wait a day and you're going to get a kala sarpa. So between those two, I typically don't worry about them. So I would say that this chart has a kala sarpa yoga. So there is like some, effort, some ambition that's being driven here. And since Rahu is in the 12th house, I think this is about, there's ambition here. Rahu represents things that are foreign or distant overseas, and the 12th house also represents similar things. and Mars is there, even though Mars is shifting out of there. I think there's going to be a lot to do with foreign policy coming up in terms of new, positive, hopefully more positive discussions, and maybe even creative, discussions. Because again, the students are protesting, issues in the Middle East, and I mean, I went to college a long time ago, and even back then, they were people on my campus were, protesting things going on in the Middle East. So again, it's an old story. So, are there any new conversations that we can had, or any new, creative ideas that can, improve situations? Um, the other thing is the second chart, six of the grahas, 6 out of 9 grahas are in signs of Jupiter, Venus. So, I think that's a mixed bag, because Jupiter and Venus are the two great benefics. So at least there's, the platform again is a positive platform. The only thing is that there's still combust. Luckily, Jupiter is getting back online out of combustion on June 3rd, so just a few days after this. So I think, um, there's still planting of seeds, but we're not really going to see the recovery yet, or just the beginning. You'll be able to see the visual, tangible recovery that's happening, not just with the student protests, but sort of, collectively in the energy towards the end of the month or beginning of June. Um, so what I was saying here is because again, and the other thing about this pravraja yoga and the second house is that at this moment in time, May 31st, Jupiter and Venus are combust. But and Mercury's there just barely. It's Sunday. It's in the first degree, so it's unstable. So the only planets you see in the second house are its sun. So king, leadership, presidents, administration, that sort of thing, authority. Jupiter and Venus are combust, but you have Mercury there, which represents things like students, which represents things like education, writing, friendship, that sort of thing. But what's interesting to me is that I think almost the same day that Jupiter comes back from combustion, Mercury goes into combustion. So you're going to get a switcheroo between Jupiter and Mercury. So again, it's kind of there's some limitation on communication, but it's starting to, build back up. I mean, this is a pretty nice combination here with Sun, Jupiter, Venus, Mercury. The only thing is that Jupiter and Venus are combust. So the good thing, and that's part of why the theme for the month was, I believe, healing from within, because part of what needs to happen for any more positive communication and more rebuilding of relationships or rebuilding property or whatever is you really have to kind of focus on healing self within. Like, what was it within that ended communication, or ended a relationship, or um, had people like protesting and destroying property and stuff like that. Like, what on a deeper level, what needs to be healed within oneself, because that's the only way to really move forward with healing with others, is take responsibility for what we can and see, look at what we brought to that situation that may have exacerbated it or not, you know. Um, yeah, so I think again with this Jupiter Venus combustion, I think it's going to be, and especially with Venus being the sort of socializing planet, May's going to be, quite quiet, and kind of more about discussion with self, because again, this internal energy of like healing is going to be there, not so much external. So I think we're planting seeds here of how to repair and start over, especially with, our inner circle, if there's been a rift there. So you can see how that energy is shifting through the month. Okay, so let's talk about the slow-moving planets. Usually I do these last, but I'm going to do them first this month because I think that they're actually kind of the main story, especially with Jupiter moving sign. So May 1st, as I mentioned, Jupiter entered Taurus or Vrishabha constellation. So Taurus is a fixed Earth sign, or Stira Prithvi in Sanskrit, and this is an enemy sign for Jupiter. Um, I wouldn't worry about that so much. it's not going to function. Jupiter's not going to function as well as when it was Aries because Mars rules Aries and Mars is a friend to Jupiter. But it'll bring Jupiter down a bit. Um, I think more of the reason why is that Jupiter's going from, Aries, which is a very movable, action-oriented sign, which can be very unstable because Mars is an unstable planet and that's the ruler of Aries. And now we're moving into, Taurus, which is ruled by Venus and fixed Earth. It's like we're going from, almost like a ADD, ADHD type situation to, okay, let's take some of these ideas and try to implement them. Let's try to plant them in the soil and see them, function as opposed to just, we're here, there, and everywhere without focus or direction. So, and then with Jupiter being the great benefic, this is potentially a time again to heal Taurus and the other signs that Jupiter aspects. And Jupiter is going to also aspect Virgo and Capricorn, the other earth signs. So Jupiter is going to be on all three earth signs. So very practical, tangible, material type of healing. And it's also going to be on Scorpio. And Scorpio is a, fixed water sign. So deep, long-term emotions. We're going to get some Jupiterian energy there. So again, this is going to be for the next year because Jupiter is going to be in Taurus until June 12th of 2000. Oh no, wait. Let me just double check. I gotta check on these dates. Let me check on the dates. I think I have them written wrong here. But basically, for about a year, Jupiter, and I'll fix the dates in terms of the writing that's on the slide, but Jupiter's going to be in Taurus and aspecting Virgo, Scorpio, and Capricorn for a good year. The other thing about, especially Virgo and Capricorn, is that they've been going in and out of K2 energy. K2 is the south node of the moon. It's very unstable. It's like Mars, but even more kind of hidden, erratic, unpredictable. And as Mercury has been going from Capricorn, especially from Capricorn, but even like when it went through Virgo in the fall, um, through Capricorn and then Pisces and then Taurus, these signs, like basically, since K2 is in Mercury, certain positions away from where K2 is, Mercury is going to set K2 off and K2 is going to shine it, aspect its light and energy onto 5 and 9 houses away. So over the last month, we've been going in and you'll see over the month of May, we're going to go in and out of K2 energy in both Taurus and Capricorn as well. So bringing more chaos. It's going to feel better and then it's going to get worse. It's going to feel better and it's going to get worse. So there's healing in at least Jupiter now is in the picture. Jupiter's not super, super strong, but probably better than nothing. To help heal and balance the chaotic K2 energy in these houses that's been there since the fall. So probably some aspect of your life has just been like nonstop, like, is it going to get better? It seems like it's getting better. It gets worse. That's probably what's been going on. And at the beginning of the month, for this month of May, Jupiter's in Krittika nakshatra, which I mentioned. So since now we're moving from Martian sign, which Mars is the planet that represents fighting, to a Venusian sign, which is about diplomacy and charm and that sort of thing. We're going to be moving, even that we're going to be moving, even though Jupiter is in Krittika in both of those signs, just because we're in Taurus now, we're going to be moving more towards the nurturing energy of Krittika nakshatra. So we're going to be doing more nurturing after fighting. Okay, and then again, once Jupiter moved into Taurus, it ended a parivartana with Mars. So now you don't have Mars all over the chart. So even that should bring less arguing, and also probably less legal issues. Like it seems like everything has been a legal issue. Like, now Trump is going through his, ex-president Trump is going through a bunch of hearings and trials and stuff like that. And student protests I mentioned, and then even like in my medical office, I rarely get these cases, but I had a case of somebody who had a fairly rough day and a car accident, and somehow through all that, got into an altercation with police and got arrested. So has medical issues, since they're trying to determine if part of that fallout is due to medical issues. So anyway, that person ended up in my office. So even on kind of a micro level, you can see how some of these energies are playing out. Um, what else? Yeah, so again, just Jupiter moving to Taurus is about grounding things and cleaning up things after a chaotic period. Uh, oh, and then Spasra of Venus is yeah, the Spasra of Venus is combust until yeah, I think I have the wrong dates. I gotta fix these dates too. But Venus is combust until early to mid July. Um, yeah. So so even though Jupiter's trying to heal things, the ground is still not stable because Venus is not stable, and that's the platform of Taurus, right? So then on May 3rd, Jupiter goes combust or asta. So it'll be until June 2nd. I think I said June 3rd before. June 2nd, 3rd, probably wherever you are in the world. So during this time, talking, even education, teachers may kind of go underground or disappear, which they have for various reasons. And it's going to be more of an internal or self-reflection time, or like self-care time, I would say, with all this like Jupiterian, you know, positive energy is going to be within more than externally focused. So again, a pretty good time to repair, rebuild, refinance, because Jupiter is not only again, Jupiter is not only a planet that represents wealth, and banking, but Taurus is a sign that represents like building wealth. Like physical wealth. May 5th, Jupiter leaves Sunday. So Sunday's the first or last degree of sign. That's where a planet's unstable because it's switching energies. So Jupiter's going to stabilize. So, okay, so you can see like we're slowly getting more stable through the month here. And May 7th, Saturn's going to have an exact aspect on the Sun. So, Saturn's super strong in its own sign of Aquarius. That's in Purva, as I mentioned. That's a very, I would say, virulent nakshatra. The symbol of Purva is the front legs of a funeral pyre. So a lot of combustion, transformation, releasing of old things. And the thing is, Sun represents things like administration, president, can be father, can be career, can be health. So yeah, there's probably going to be some clash here on May 7th. So this might be like, again, if we're just sticking with this student protest idea, to exemplify some of these concepts here. Some of these administrators are going to end up going, right? I mean, they're going to get voted out by their board of directors or whatever. And some of these students are going to get booted from school as well. So, there's going to be a lot of turnover there. So that might completely switch somebody off the career they were planning for, or the administrative career they were planning for. I can see that. The thing though is that I think ultimately this will be, even though it's a very tumultuous time still, um, something positive should come out of this, to bring a, silver lining to all this, because Saturn isn't in its own sign. So even though Saturn's, fairly destructive here, um, it's in the sign of Aquarius, which is a fixed air sign. So fixed ideas. So there's also going to be an ending of old fixed ideas here. So again, I'm hoping that, like we saw in the second chart of the planets moving through the month, that all these like positive planets and the second house is that um, there's at least a chance, a possibility of a new life, of new ideas, um, coming forward from all this destruction. Let's hope. And also, Saturn being its own sign, that's going to give you, even though Saturn's very strong, it's considered a malevolent planet and all this sort of thing. At least Saturn's in its own sign. That's going to bring strength. That's going to bring some, like, at least some honor to and long lasting effect here. Um, as opposed to like when Saturn's in Aries and when it's debilitated. I mean, that's going to be even like a whole nother level to what we've been experiencing so far. Um, the sun is exalted in Bharani at this time. So Sun again is about the soul. It represents the soul, career, these things listed here: health, work, death, purpose, life, and Bharani is the womb, so it's like cycles of life and death. So there's going to be a lot of turnover here, and very, I think, important aspects of people's lives, especially through the next week. May 10th, we're going to end that K2 5-9 aspect. So because Mercury's shifting out of Pisces, so that should bring a little less chaos and separation. That's been churning, the last few weeks. May 13th, Saturn has an exact aspect on Venus. So now that really strong, chaotic, ending energy that Saturn is on Venus. So Venus represents things like relationships, art, vehicles, pets, you know, um, and these may be, so like a lot of relationships, I think, are going to be ending here. But it may not be like how do I say? You may not see it. Like it may not be like a direct interaction or something like that, but it's like, maybe you'll get like a letter or a text or something like that, or maybe somebody will just, disappear, off the scene, that sort of thing. Um, because Venus is combust, so you won't see necessarily this relationship. It might just be like an internal kind of like, okay, I'm releasing this relationship, and maybe the person decides there's not enough emotional, it's not worth the emotional investment of, um, having a discussion with somebody and even letting them know, or it's just like, it's just over, and just, internally letting it go, that sort of thing. An internal release of that relationship, even if no words are spoken or there's no direct communication about it. May 18th, Mars crosses Rahu. And again, Mars in a way is also crossing Ketu, because Ketu is exactly, opposite of Rahu. And Ketu's in the nakshatra of Hasta with the moon. Luckily, Mars and Rahu are both in Revati, which is a fairly gentle nakshatra. Um, but Mars is an explosive planet. Ketu's an explosive planet. Rahu's about ambition. Moon is about the mind, and the public. And Ketu's in Hasta, which is about kind of grabbing control. So, May 18th, we may see kind of a, some sort of blow up or explosive end to things in a very kind of emotional or public way, unfortunately. Because again, what we've seen, because Mars has been aspecting Ketu for a while now, and until Mars moves into Aries, it'll finally get out of the sign, or its aspect will finally get out of the sign of Virgo, where Ketu's been for a while since the fall. So, yeah, this might be kind of like the, depending on where you are in your birth chart, this might be like I mean, for some of the things that have been going on since fall, like that last sort of like skirmish or fallout here, blow up, for things that have been unstable. Then the 22nd through 24th of May, Venus and Jupiter will be in planetary war, or graha yuddha. And this is going to be in Taurus. So and the thing is, that Venus and Jupiter, again, the two diplomatic planets, graciousness, compassion. They're also the two counselors, the worldly counselor Venus, the spiritual counselor Jupiter. So, and there's some arguing here. I think it's relatively mild arguing because it's all in Venus, sign of Venus, and Venus is there. So Venus will protect to some degree. But this is more about, I think, protection of um, more tangible things rather than like people. Um, so there's going to be arguing here about how to counsel and heal through this, because people are having different ideas. It's like theory versus practice, spiritual versus practical. Like what are the highest values in this scenario here? This could even be like kids. At least could be like a, mild argument between kids, teacher versus spouse, that sort of thing. I think last year, I want to say, don't quote me on this. I want to say last year Venus and Jupiter were in war in Pisces, so they were in a sign of Jupiter instead of Taurus. And I remember somebody called me about their kid who kind of blew up because their kid got a haircut and it kind of blew up at the barber shop or something, the hairdresser, hair salon. So, it's kind of like a, kid, Jupiter representing kid and Venus representing an artist, like a hairstylist. There was a little bump there. I mean, again, it wasn't like fallout of, World War, but, there was, somebody was bothered enough to call me about it. So, it could be, kids, teachers, spouse, some mild arguments or, things going on there or bumps going on there. But again, it's fairly contained because this is all happening in Venus, and Venus is in its own sign to some extent, right? On May 27th, Saturn is going to have an exact aspect on Mercury. So you can see there's going to be this parade going on here of planets passing through um, Aries and Saturn aspecting in Aries. So we had Sun and then Venus, I think. Yeah. So Saturn's going to hit Sun first, and then it's going to Venus, and then Mercury. So, again, Mercury represents things like students and communication and yeah, discussions and things like that. So, travel even. So, this could be, um, maybe because of things like the student protests, but even just graduate. This is graduation time. So even if the student protests haven't affected graduation, it's a natural kind of ending for students in a lot of ways. Um, and yeah, there's gonna be some chaos there because again, Saturn is these planets that are parading through Aries. Saturn's debilitated in Aries, so it's going to be a even more kind of probably sudden or ending, or unexpected ending. Then May 31st, K2 actually shows 5-9 aspects again because Mercury has moved into Taurus, and so we'll get a little bit more chaos picking up again at the end of the month. Okay, so then the Sun, May 7th, I mentioned this already. Saturn is the exact aspect on the Sun. The Sun will be conjoined with the combustion Venus and the Moon and Bharani Nakshatra. So there's going to be, the two emotional planets here. There's going to be a lot of unseen emotions. And this could again be a challenge or ending related to work, career, health, father, boss, administration, those sorts of things. May 10th, Sun enters Krittika Nakshatra. So this could be, a mixed message in terms of these things like, father, boss, administration, like mixed messages. Because again, Krittika is a dual nakshatra of fighting and nurturing. So are we going to fight? Or are we going to nurture? Are we going to make peace or try to build here or let this go? It's going to be a little bit of a mixed bag for a while. And then Sun is going to be conjoined with Venus and Mercury. So, there could be the start of like nurturing, seeding new writing projects and communications. So that correlates with the way the sky pattern is shifting through the month. Then May 14th, Sun enters Taurus or Vrishabha. Um, Oh, sorry, let me back up. I think I was assuming or thinking ahead that Sun was in Vrishabha on May 10th. Sun is still in Aries on May 10th. So it's going to be like a starting. It's more of a fiery energy rather than just planting seeds. When it moves into Taurus, that's when you start planting the seeds. The Sun, Venus, Mercury in Aries is kind of about like actions and stuff like that, but not necessarily anything that's steady and grounded and something that will grow over time. Um, so when Sun moves into Taurus on the 14th, then you'll start planting something that's a little bit more solid moving forward. Um, and I think this is, luckily for his Sun, it's going to be leaving the influence of this debilitated Saturn energy that's in Aries. So again, the Sun representing these, major aspects of somebody's life, work, career, health, father, administration. You know, um, the Sun will have a chance to start healing, creating a new reality after all this pummeling that's been going on between Saturn and Purva Bhadrapada and Mars KT combinations and things like that. Then on May 24th, Sun enters Rohini Nakshatra. So this should be some feel good energy here. So I know it's probably been sounding pretty grim so far. So, all these things happen in cycles. So, the sun also represents the soul, and Rohini is the most attractive, almost like seductive nakshatra of the nakshatras. So, um, the sun rolling through Rohini, it's like soul feeling grounded, optimistic, engaged in life again, gardening and art and, travel, the finer things of life, like a very Lakshmi or, goddess of wealth and health and abundance type of energy. So I think, again, towards the end of the month, there's going to be much improvement to the issues that I've been talking about so far. And this is going to be kind of the light at the end of the tunnel. And then the thing is, a few days after this, Venus moves into Rohini. So, and they're both going to be in a sign of Venus. So again, it's going to be like towards the end of the month, people are going to be feeling much more magnanimous and generous and forgiving and, trying to move past, you know, stuff that's been falling out. And not just, and then we had the like eclipses, like, so in that, that solar eclipse that happened, what was it, April 8th, that went basically over my head almost because I live close to New York City. I think that's part of why we saw so much flaring up of things in New York City, for example, like universities there. So yeah, so better times are coming. At least we'll see that, I think, more towards the end of the month. So as always, with my monthly transit videos, I like to incorporate a few birth charts so we can, and the birth charts have similar positioning of planets and such as the current sky pattern. So these birth charts are meant to kind of embody these energies so that what I'm talking about is not so abstract and sort of obscure. So the first chart I was going to talk about is the birth chart of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And that name may sound familiar to you. He was the creator and writer of the Sherlock Holmes series. So let's look at his chart. He was born on May 22nd, 1859, at 4:55 a.m. in Edinburgh, United Kingdom. The Lagna Nakshatra for him was Mrigashirsha, which is symbolized by a deer's head, and there's a lot of searching energy with Mrigashirsha. Okay. Then we have Sun in Nakshatra of Krittika. Okay, we've been talking about Krittika, so loving, fighting, both, right? Which side of the other thing is Krittika is symbolized by a sharp tool. Okay, so yeah, and then the Moon Nakshatra is an Uttarashada, so there's a sharp victory. So you can see there's like a lot of sharpness here, which Sherlock Holmes was very sharp, right? I mean, that's why he was so famous because he would pick up on these like minute details and solve cases and stuff like that. And that was part of the intrigue of uh, Doyle's Sir Doyle's writings and stuff like that. Okay, so then the Day Lord was Sun, and the Hora Lord or Hour Lord was Venus. So Sun, being in, top here, and this is not a sun chart. This is actually like a birth chart. The Sun happens to be at the top here. So it's a lot of kind of like master energy or authority energy, that sort of thing. And Venus is in the 12th house here. So this could potentially be like a loss of things that Venus symbolizes, like love, relationships, wealth, finer things of life, pets, even, that sort of thing. But there is a parivartana exchange of houses between Venus and Mars. So there's going to be some protection of losses there. So far, what we're seeing is like searching, love, fight, sharp tools, and the sharp tools like are kind of you can kind of think about that two ways. It could be sharp tools like I usually with writers or people involved with writing, often see placements in Krittika because that sharp tool could be like a pen. But for him, I think it works both ways. because the sun is in a dual nakshatra. So this could even mean for him, he has two careers, which actually he did. He was mostly known for his writing Sherlock Holmes, but he was actually a surgeon. And so, and he specifically went into the field of ophthalmology, so he was an eye surgeon, although he was a failed eye surgeon. Okay. But for that, he would also need sharp tools. So and then you can see also in the top here, sun, and the top sun can represent things like medicine, and Mars is there. Mars can represent things like surgery. Yeah. So, and Mars, this Mars Venus, parivartana here, that could be like surgery of eyes. His eyes are represented by the 12th house and the second house. Sun also represents eyes, and Venus is in the nakshatra of Ashwini, so salvaging, right? Salvaging, rescuing eyes, rescuing people. It can also be rescuing people, like Venus also represents women. And so in the 12th house, you can imagine like Mercury there with Venus and Mars. This could be writing about, the loss of men and women, or times, right? Or losses of men and women. So you can see already that it's kind of, this energy of being a writer and writing about things, losses, and sharp objects, being involved is here. And then with again, Mrigashirsha searching, right? Searching for answers, searching for sharp tools, even, murder weapons and things like that. Could be. Right. Depends on how you use it, right? Are you going to use the sharp tool to fight and destroy, or are you going to use it to help and heal? So you can see that duality. So I found that interesting because I was sort of like, when I was reading his story, I was like, I'm surprised his chart isn't like a Dwasvabhava dual chart like Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces. But with his sun being in a dual sign, that's where you get the duality for him. Then his birth dasha, he was born into Sun, Venus, Rahu, Mercury. You can see again, we're back at the sun. So we've been, the sun energy's come up a few times already. So this dual career, writing career probably. Venus, Venus can also represent the arts. So with Venus in the 12th house, this could be he spent a lot of time on his own, introvert, kind of in a little place, introverted place, and then brought that back, you know, um, into the public light. And we got Mercury here. So Mercury and Venus together, this could be like, his art is writing about, Mercury's in Bharani nakshatra, so the womb again, writing about birth and death, rescuing birth and death, right? Rescuing deaths and stuff like that. And then Rahu there, Rahu is all about like ambition, but it's also about hidden things. So like these murder mysteries he was writing about. I mean, the genre is a very mysterious genre. And I think his career path was very mysterious as well to him. I think he might have been surprised because it happened pretty quickly. I mean, he did a lot of training and he practiced as a physician. Like he was actually a surgeon on a ship, a whaler ship. He did that for a while, and then he opened up an office in the UK, and apparently didn't go anywhere. He didn't get any. They said in the bio they said he wasn't getting any patients. So probably while he's waiting for patients, he's sitting there like writing this stuff, and then that's what took off, and that's what he ended up doing. We're famous for him. You can also see in his chart, besides the Venus, Mars, parivartana. You can see that double-sided kind of pinkish arrow. He had another parivartana exchange of houses between Saturn and Moon. So he's got an exchange between Saturn, Moon, uh, Mars, Venus, and those are the four passion planets. So he's very passionate about what he did. And you can see he's very emotional in some ways, but also very like this mix of arts, like Venus and Moon are emotions and arts. And Mars and Saturn are very technical. And that's what his art was. I mean, he wrote fiction, but about very technical things that only like chemists and surgeons and doctors and things would know about. Legal people would know about. And you can see there's like combination here of passion and distance as well. Saturn is a, distant planet, and you have Venus in the house of isolation. This could be like, again, going overseas, like he traveled on this whaling ship and stuff, but it could also be, looks like his art was, done in private. He's also got a color sarpa yoga. He's only got moon on one side of Rahu Ketu, so there's ambition here as well. So you can see his chart building up already. Okay, so let's start at the top and go through the few houses here. And you'll see with the charts I've included today, they're all oriented towards Taurus, and they all have Sun in Taurus because, again, Sun is going into Taurus very soon. So we can see, like, kind of, it'll give us, I think, some indication of what Sun in Taurus is bringing us towards the end of the month, because that's when I think things are really going to start, shifting, and we're going to be seeing more, or at least the starting of a healing process here. Um, Taurus, Vrishabha in Sanskrit, fixed earth sign, Stir Prithvi, so very solid, tangible, unmovable, tangible, long-term results is what we're looking at. Okay. Sun in Krittika, so we talked about that. Mars and Mrigashirsha, so someone who's constantly seeking, answers and education, which is what he was. And then Venus and Ashwini. Ashwini can also be not just a rescuing energy, but also, like, it can be, like I mentioned, the symbol for Ashwini is the Kumara twins, which are the celestial healers. So healing energy. So this could be him on the whaling ship going out and coming back. But when we have all this in the first house, again, that diamond in the middle, master, we could get police here with Sun and Mars together. That's a lot of like fire energy. That could be like military or police type activity, rescuing, saving lost people, especially men and women. A lot of seeking energy, sharp instruments, and writing a new genre, because also Ashwini is the first nakshatra, the first constellation. So his art was something innovative. And I think, his crime mystery novels were, I don't know, I mean, they're still top notch, aren't they? I don't read that genre very much, but I mean, I think most people know about Sherlock Holmes. Um, and then the Lagnatia, the ruling planet for the chart, has gone 12th house of loss. This is Mokshasthana. So again, I think he had a tension here, usually with parivartanas, because the Venus is Lagnatia in parivartana. There's um, tension between duty, which is the first house, it's dharmasthana, and the 12th house of moksha, or liberation. So I think that's why over time he finally kind of let loose of his medical aspirations and just followed his passion of writing, because he was very prolific, actually. Um, and he did traveling, and he was quite introverted, it seems, in many ways. Quite a bit in his head, I think. Um, yeah. So again, just to kind of ground the chart. Then the second house here, the second lord is Mercury and Bharani, and Jupiter and Mrigashirsha. So again, we have more searching energy. This could be, I say this could be like asking a lot of questions to, I'm guessing if you met him in person, he would sort of be a little bit like Sherlock Holmes, where he was asking a lot of questions to figure things out, like either medical questions or maybe law questions or that sort of thing. Also the family and money. There could be losses here due to family and money, because the second house lord has gone to the 12th house. Um, and he did actually, it was a bit, how do I say, unsteady for him. Um, his father, what was the story with his father? I think his father was an alcoholic, and mother couldn't take care of the kids, and so the kids got dispersed and came back together. So yeah, I mean, he did not have, and he grew up in poverty. So his early life was not very steady. And actually, I think from his chart, what I was getting from his chart is part of the reason why he got became so introverted and got interested in writing and research and stuff like that. It was almost like a reaction to all the emotional and family upheaval that was going on when he was young. But you can also see here that he's like trying to find his voice. And maybe again, if he was just getting shuffled around as a kid with all these different kids, different relatives, or I don't know if they were institutions and stuff where he was placed, but um, if he just got lost in the shuffle, maybe no, he didn't really have anybody to talk to on a regular basis, and so he ended up kind of talking to himself through his writing and talking to these characters through writing. Yeah. So, and because Jupiter represents literature and writing, and it's in the second house, he benefits through literature and writing, which clearly he did. In the third house here, the expositor, the ruler of that house is the moon. The moon is an uttara ashada, so a piercing victory of the mind. So, very sharp mind here. Aspected, where am I saying? Oh, a moon aspects its own sign. So there's a lot of imagination as well in the third house and writing. Again, this is where its prolific writing comes from and speaking. Jupiter in the second house of uh, Saturn in the third house, aspected by the moon. That's a lot of imagination and talking and that sort of thing. Mars also aspects there when you do the parivartana. So, imagination plus technical writing, because Mars and Saturn are technical and Moon's imagination and art. So, also a high level of dexterity, I'm guessing, especially if he was a surgeon, that would be a good thing to have. So he, you know, sews people up well. This could also be, some, um, how do I say, issues with siblings and stuff. So again, I think this might get uh, back to, the siblings being dispersed. So there might be some distance with siblings and that sort of thing, although he would have siblings based on this. Then the fourth house here, the fourth house lord is the sun. Ketu's here in Maga. It's symbolized by a throne, aspected by Mars. So you have, Ketu and Mars here. So it's almost like, again, like the current sky pattern, where there's going to be a lot of disruptions here to home life and family line and that sort of thing. So troubles with mom, fourth house going to be mother, home, happiness, scattered in childhood. And he did grow up in poverty. So that was all true for him. And you can see that from his fourth house. The fifth house here, the fifth house lord is Mercury aspected by Saturn. So this is going to give him a very meticulous mind, a very practical mind, highly logical, detail oriented. Yeah, and let me see. Did I write down? Is Saturn in? I don't remember if Saturn is in Pusha or if Saturn is in oh, why did I write it down? No, I didn't write it down. Saturn is either in, should be able to count it out. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 3. Hold on. Saturn should be in Pusha. There should be like a nurturing energy here. Um, Even though there's, again, some delays and obstacles and things like that. But Saturn is going to be this like long haul thinking, like long term thinking, and then Mercury, again, being in Virgo, that's going to be like a very meticulous, grounded, detail oriented, practical type of mind that he's going to have. Then the sixth house here, you can see all these planets are aspecting here. You have Venus aspecting its own sign, also with Jupiter, Mercury, Mars, Saturn. So this is where, you're going to get your Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, almost sort of like a Saraswati type energy in the sixth house of acute problems, acute illnesses. I think this is giving him a lot of power because he's running so many planets in the sixth house. He's kind of like a sixth house guy, of as a physician, but also in his crime novels and things like that. And he's mixing the art with the technical stuff, so you could get like creative writing about problems here, right? I mean, he's not writing romance novels, you know. So then the seventh house here, the Lord is Mars, and it's aspected by Sun and Venus. So because Mars is aspecting its own sign, this can be a very strong independent business. So he was essentially an entrepreneur with his writing and his, even though his medicine, dropped after a while, he was an entrepreneur with that as well. And I could, because we're also talking about Scorpio here, and the seventh house, he's going to be a master of psychology and relationships, which is, a lot of what his crime novels were about, like, sort of, forensic psychology. Yeah. There's also a bhavam here because the seventh lord has gone 7 houses away to the first house. That's going to mean he's got multiple products, or for him, like multiple writings, I would say. It could also be multiple careers, but I think for him it was his proliferation of writing primarily. Then the eighth house lord is Jupiter. It's aspected in its own, and Mars is here. So this is going to be like deep research into law and also alternative spirituality. Apparently, and we'll talk about the ninth house because the ninth house is about religion. You can see there's probably some, separation from religion. And he was agnostic, but then later on in his life, he got into the kind of like alternative spirituality, which you can see in his chart here. But yeah, deep into research. And then the ninth house lord is Saturn, aspecting its own. So it's going to be a very practical education. This could be his medical education, because Saturn can represent medicine. The moon is here in Uttarashada, so he's gonna finish his studies. It's just a matter of, is he gonna use them, practically or not. Um, and it doesn't look like it because you don't have, to some extent, he will, because Saturn is not only the lord of his ninth house of higher education, but it's the lord of his 10th house of date, 9 to 5 jobs. So I think he will get some work, and I think he did some work, but when he's not running those planets, then I think his 7th house of entrepreneurship is stronger. So he'd be more of that. Um, Let me get back to this here. Yeah, so the ninth house, higher education, classical education, which he was classically trained, helping others because he's got the moon there of public and Saturn there of Pusha, like Pusha is a nakshatra is symbolized by a cow's udder. So it's a very like stabilizing, nurturing energy. So this could be helping others, like medicine again. But this could also be like distance from father. So if father was alcoholic and had some mental illness, and also issues with politics and religion, which he did have. And then the 10th house lord against Saturn, aspected by Jupiter and Rahu. Rahu's in Dhanishta nakshatra, which can be symbolized by kind of a drum or a rhythm, that sort of thing. So this could be an ambition. Rahu symbolizes ambition. So an ambitious habit of seeking literature. Like he was not only a prolific writer, but he was a prolific reader as well. I mean, despite his early childhood, I think he had like luckily, an uncle or something who was wealthy enough to help pull him out of mess that he grew up in. And he went through school and he went through medical program and became a doctor. I mean, that's a long haul, situation there. But then, again, over time, these other things like that he was passionate about became more of his not only his interest and his the way he spent time, but also his bread and butter. He made a lot of money um, from his writings. Actually, what he did is he started writing, and then people wanted to publish them, and so he kept raising his rates because he was trying to protect his writing. But then people were still willing to pay these like exorbitant fees, so he ended up making like a bunch of money. You can also see his 11th house lord of income has gone to the second house of savings, so he did pretty well. Um, yeah, then the 11th house, since we're there, Jupiter aspected by Saturn, so this is, again, a mixed bag. I mean, I think his socializing was more for, I want to say almost like marketing purposes, because he has a Saturn there. So he's going to be, again, not into so many groups and societies, or they're going to be, private clubs and stuff like that. So I wasn't seeing him being like a super, like a social butterfly type, but he did get involved with things like crimes clubs and stuff like that. So he had these little kind of niche groups and stuff like that that were, had similar interests to him, he did find. But again, I think mostly to support his own interests. Like, I think it was more interest based rather than like relationship based, is what I would say. Then the 12th house here, we have Mars in there with parivartana, Mercury, Venus. So a lot of time spent alone, writing and researching, that sort of thing. Um, and then again, as I mentioned, as famous as he was for Sherlock Holmes, he was a failed ophthalmologist essentially. Um, so that's the other reason why I thought, like we'll see with the charts that I'm using, the birth charts I'm analyzing for this month, is that you'll see that there's like, for I think all three of them, there is this like, rags to riches, riches to rags, like kind of, both sides, um, you know, very high level times in one's life and then very low level times. And you can see that like, there was great success in many ways for all three, even though it was a mixed bag. And so again, it's sort of like, um, that's, I think, again, encapsulating or embodying the energy for this month. Yeah. So anyway, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. All right, so let's talk about Venus and Mars. May 3rd, today, Venus enters Bharani Nakshatra, again, that womb energy, life cycles. So Venus is in Aries. It's a neutral sign for Venus, a movable fire sign, so a lot of action here. And also remember that Venus is going to aspect Libra, its own sign, with Mars. Um, let me just check on that. Oh, because Mars is in Pisces, so Mars is aspecting Libra from Pisces. I was like, Mars is not there. Okay, yeah. So you do have both Venus and Mars energy in Libra. So, there for some people there could be some sort of romance going on here, but again, Venus is combust, so um you might see that there's actually a little bit more of like aggression or like libido because Mars, you'll see Mars, but you won't see Venus, so you won't see as much diplomacy or compassion. Or this may even be that like you don't see the person in the you know 3D world. Maybe it's just um, speaking to somebody or whatever, texting somebody, that sort of thing, emailing somebody. Um, so I also see that there's could be like stepping back to let a partner follow their mission or travel. Because again, Venus is going to be combust until, early mid July. And with all these things going on, I could see like, there's a lot of fires to be put out here. And so it could be that, you may not see, your sweetie for a while because they have to deal with, because, depending on your birth chart and what planets you're running, all these like harsher energies are going to be hitting one part of your life or one part of your chart and one part of your life or more. And so it may be that like there's a strain on relationships to some extent, because, it's just the priority temporarily. So the next bit of time is that, they have to go deal with the fallout from some of these other harsh situations. Yeah. Um, and this could be like a birth and death of relationships as well, because Venus is in Bharani. So again, the life cycle of birth and death. So there's this kind of a bit of churning here. It's not a really steady energy. Because you also have, like I mentioned, Venus is going to be aspected by Saturn. Oh, and that's what's coming up here on May 13th. So, an exalted Sun plus Mercury, with a combust Venus here. I don't remember if Mercury's combust at this time, but to be, attempting to lead some sort of diplomatic discussion. I just don't know how far it's going to get. It might actually be, the end of a diplomatic discussion, and just sort of like, sort of authority authority control of the situation, the authority taking over control of the situation that's kind of, downward spiraling. And then on May 14th, you have Mars entering Revati Nakshatra. So, Mars is still in the mix here with Rahu and Ketu. So there's still chaos going on. But Revati is a gentler nakshatra than where Mars has been. In Purva Bhadrapada and Uttar Bhadrapada, Revati actually represents things like traveling and hospitality. And it's the last nakshatra, the last sign. So you're going to get this Martian energy kind of winding down, okay, for the last couple weeks. Then May 16th, Venus enters Krittika nakshatra. So again, this could be like advocating, fighting for a beloved cause. This could be like love letters and stuff because again, you can't see Venus. So um, maybe it's, writing in your journal about somebody. That could be about some love interest, that sort of thing. And or yeah, it could be that. But it's kind of like some, do we fight for the relationship or nurture the relationship, or what's potentially going to bring these relationships back online, back into better form or situation. Then May 18th, Venus enters Taurus, its own sign, so it's going to be strong, with combust. And then the same day, Mars crosses Rahu. So um, you're going to get a grounding and nourishing of ideas into reality. There's going to be, especially with Mars crossing Rahu, that's going to be ambitious, a new cycle. And I would say switching to a more diplomatic approach, because now that Venus is out of the influence of Saturn, it's moving into its own sign. It can bring more positivity and compassion, diplomacy to all the stuff that's been going down the last, month or so. Then the 22nd, 24th of May, I mentioned this already, Venus, Jupiter, planetary war. Fairly mild. I wouldn't worry too much about this one. Minor hiccups, I think, with relationships. May 27th, Venus enters Rohini nakshatra. So again, I think this is going to be nice because Sun has just moved there a few days before. So Sun and Venus both in Rohini, the most attractive, lovely nakshatra. That's a nice way to end the month. Get in that energy. So finding love within, because Venus is still combust, so it's more of an internal job. Self-care, unseen or spoken attraction. So, maybe you've got a crush on somebody and they just don't know it, or you think they don't know it, or you haven't told them about it, or, clarified or validated, maybe there's thoughts about it. Then June 1st, Mars enters Aries or Mesha, its own sign, so strength there, and Ashwini nakshatra. So this is like brand new start. Yeah, whether it's successful or not, I guess we'll have to wait to see what happens in June. But Mars is an innovator, a rebel. It's in its own sign. Aries being a movable air sign or movable fire sign, so a lot of action here. So this is like really starting over. Yeah. Okay, so the second chart I looked at was the chart of Peter Carl Faberge. You may not know him, but you probably know what he created. He's the creator of the Faberge eggs. So if you know them, they're these like highly um, prized and expensive, bejeweled eggs made out of like precious stones and gold and things like that. That were so precious. In fact, even when they were first created, very first Fabergé egg was a gift gifted to the Empress of Russia. So anyway, Peter Carl Fabergé was the inventor, creator of that and many other things. So let's look at his chart. I do not have a birth time for him, so this is a sun rising chart, a Surya Lagna. He was born May 30th, 1846. No birth time that I know of. And he was born in St. Petersburg, Russia. I don't have Lagna Nakshatra because I don't have birth time. The Sun Nakshatra was in Rohini, so we're talking about attractive energy. And he made some very attractive things that people still pay loads of money for, and they're sitting in museums, 100 years later. Um, the moon nakshatra, hard to say. He's either in Push or Aslesha because the moon is right about there. Um, within a few hours, he's from halfway through the day or so, he's in one than the other. Day Lord, probably Saturn, but Saturn is the day Lord after 2:54 a.m. The Hora Lord, not known. Birth of Shah was Saturn and Mercury. So already from Saturn and Mercury, this is a pretty, I would say, practical guy, probably business oriented with a long term, view is what I would guess. And then we kind of get more of that because he has a parivartana between Mercury and Mars. So he's born into Saturn, Mercury, and then he's got Mercury and Mars all over his chart. So Mercury can be things like business, especially when it's in his own sign. And then Mars, that's like innovation, manufacturing. So when you get Saturn, Mars, Mercury together, it's like a business manufacturer of some kind, which is what he was. His father owned a small jewelry shop, jewelry manufacturer. I think there were maybe 10 employees, and then he passed it on to Peter at some point, and then Peter grew it, and not only grew it because his father's business wasn't known for very high level jewelry pieces that empresses would wear. It was just kind of a medium level or mediocre type place. But Peter Carl is the one who elevated it to such high status and grew it and made it an international, long term, famous business. The other thing is that you can see here that the sun in the first house, we have sun and Jupiter. Sun, as I mentioned, is in Rohini. Jupiter is in Krittika nakshatra. We know about that from all the charts I've done so far. You can see, though, that sun and Jupiter are about 10 degrees apart. So literally the same day, Jupiter came out of combustion. So it represents, what we're seeing in the sky currently. It came out of combustion 12:51 a.m. the same day. So you can literally see this as like this Jupiter just coming back online after it's been combust. So I was seeing this as kind of like end of the month or beginning of June when Jupiter comes back online. Because Jupiter's going to be in Taurus and Sun's going to be in Taurus. Jupiter's going to be in Krittika. I think about that time, pretty soon after that, Sun's going to be in Rohini. So this is going to be very similar to the end of the month. And Sun represents things like, career, but he's going to have a career involved with like attraction and seduction and beauty, which all these like, not only bejeweled eggs and things that he made, but, golden bejeweled eggs, but he made other golden bejeweled things. That was kind of his style. Um, and Sun and Jupiter can represent things like, opulence and, banking and um, gold, literally gold. So, yeah, let me just make sure. Is there anything else in the? Okay, yeah, let's just go to Lugna. It seems like it's time to. So anyway, like, but also, this could literally be like a golden dawn or a golden age. If we were looking at this not as his particular birth chart, but a time, historical moment, this would be like a golden age, which it was for a while in Russia. So let's start in the Lugna. Again, this is a Surya Lugna chart, a sun rising chart, not a Udaya Lugna or sign rising chart. So again, same thing. So again, you can I also had these charts lined up with Taurus and the Lugna, so you can compare and contrast charts because there are going to be a lot of similarities, but then there are going to be important differences as well. So again, Taurus, Vrishabha, rising, sun rising, fixed Earth, Shtura Prithvi, Sun in Rohini, Jupiter and Krittika. So a master career involving beauty, attraction, fire, that's sun. And also the Lord of course has gone to the 12th house, like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So he also was doing some art in private and isolated places like his factory or whatever. It's with Mercury. And Venus, like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's chart, is in Ashwini. So it's going to be an art that's kind of a first of its kind, a new genre. Um, and also traveling all over the world. The other thing is with him, since he was born into either Saturn or Mercury, Saturn aspects the 12th house, Mercury's there. So he's going to have a lot of traveling early on in life, and he did a world tour actually. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get back to the first house. But the first house you can see is tied with the second house or the 12th house because the Lord of the first has gone to the 12th. So there's going to be a lot of international travel and also trade of fine, right? Venus represents the finer things of life. So a lot of love, great wealth, gold. So this Venus and Ashwini is conjoined with Mercury and Ketu and Bharani. So creation of a new genre, brand new creation. Mars and Ketu there, that can be like separatist energy. Mars can also represent chemistry. So, precious metals like gold and all the other, I'm assuming alloys and, things that he would need to work with gold and tools as well. And that's the thing is like he's not like lumping it together. He's actually like, shaving it away into these intricate patterns. Um, and so the Mercury's there as like a very detail oriented, carving, shaving away of precious metals as an art that's internationally traded and world famous. You can get from it. Yeah. So it's going to be successful, new original art form, worldwide, intricate patterns, removal through heat and chemicals repeatedly because there's this, like repetition energy here. And spending time alone in the lab or factory to produce these things. And literally, when he won his first big award that kind of started really putting him on the map, he won some Pan Russia exhibition gold medal, I believe, and some magazine wrote that he was ushering in a new era in the art of jewelry. Because like, and it was kind of funny. I read that in his bio on Wikipedia, and I was like, yeah, that's what I was saying here. Yeah. So, um, yeah. So that's just the first house. Let's go on to the second. So the second lord is Mercury, which again, there's a parivartana here. So the second house is going to be very strong. So a lot of income and wealth. Also, this is the refined craftsman. Mars is like somebody who's sometimes it's like can be like a craftsman or not a but like a blue collar worker. Yeah, blue collar worker. Um, and then Mercury is like business. So there's this kind of what he was doing was like building and manufacturing and working with chemicals and stuff like that. And that's what his father did. His father started the business, but again, it wasn't quite as elevated as what Peter Carl brought it up to. So there's going to be money there, chemistry there, benefits through chemistry. Um, and Peter Carl took over his father's business at the age of 35, so still pretty young. He's also going to be really good at marketing, is what I'm seeing here. Because the second house is oral communication. So with Mercury in its own sign there, I think that's part of, like him going to these trade show or not trade shows, but exhibitions and winning medals and stuff like that. Like it was great marketing, that time. The third house lord is a Swa moon, aspected by a debilitated Mars. So looks like he's got at least one sister, I would guess. There's some troubles here. This could also be like poetry potentially. Yeah, but with Mars there aspecting, there's some, um, I would say, disruption here at the third house of siblings. So I don't know if he had a falling out with siblings or not. I'm guessing that was probably true. Then the fourth house here, the Lord is the sun. So the sun in Rohini, aspected by Saturn. So again, and Saturn is in Shatabisha. Again, it's a family line of jewelers. Or at least some career in like the beauty and the arts. But it's also in Leo here, so this is going to be something on display because Leo represents like a stage, so something you can see, like ornaments, like necklaces and earrings and stuff. These are all ornaments to you know mm, display beauty and wealth both, right? And then Shatabisha. So Saturn is strong. See, Saturn is in its own sign in Aquarius again, so that's another similarity as a current sky pattern. But it's in Saturn's in Shatabisha, so that's different from where it's currently at in Purva Bhadrapada, different nakshatra. Shatabisha though can indicate some issues with health. So I don't know if mom had health issues. I'm guessing so from this. Um, and there can be, again. Problems with family, which I'm guessing I didn't get much out of the bio regarding that. It was more of a more professional information about his life, but he was traveling all over the place, so there was some disruption, even at an early age. So there was some disruption with him because he was going around and doing trainings and stuff like that. So he was separated from his family. But this would also be an administrative education. Part of his education training was he was in trade school, but the trade school was about learning like business, like almost like an MBA, I think, type training. Um, yeah, and so that's what that I think that's how he brought up his father's business to the high level he was at. Was his main, I think, skill was, I mean, yeah, the manufacturing piece. So basically, operations and marketing were his two big skill sets from this chart. Then the fifth house lord is Mercury. So we have another, again, very meticulous oriented thinker here. Very practical, though. It's aspected by Mars and Jupiter. So a meticulous mind, perfectionist. Like apparently, sometimes for some of these projects he had, he would create like 10 different molds. And that's a lot of work to come up with a very, um, detailed, ornate, and perfect product. Yeah. So that's how his mind worked. And the sixth house here, the sixth house lord is this is Venus aspecting its own sign with Rahu and Swati, um, and then aspect also by Mercury and Mars. So Venus, Rahu, Mercury, Mars. So a lot of ambition here. I would say that through the years, there's going to be some amelioration regarding debts and enemies. But I'm sure he had to like borrow money to upgrade probably upgrade his facilities and things like that at different periods in the life cycle of the business. He might have to, and especially with like a luxury brand like that, it's probably going to be really low cycles of bringing in wealth. I'm guessing at different points of the business. So I think he was going to manage that pretty well, like rescue himself from those things, because I'm sure he also had a lot of people who didn't wish him well. Usually that's what happens when you get fairly successful. But he was able to manage it, um, I would think. But yeah, I mean, Rahu, ambitious enemies and, I could see like him trying to make the most of deficits from the past. I could see that kind of energy here when you've got this many planets between 6 and 12. Then the seventh house here. Seventh house lord is Mars, and it's aspecting its own sign from the 12th house when you do the parivartana Mercury and Mars. So the seventh house has Mars in it, Saturn, Sun, Jupiter. So manufacturing, manufacturing, manufacturing. Deeply transformative career in a craft that involves, beauty and attraction and gold, I would say, and a lot of money. Luxury goods here. Um, and at some point, the Faberge company was the largest jewelry business in Russia. And even though I think, and they had different businesses, I think through Europe, um, and I think at High Point we had 500 employees. I was surprised that the number was that low. I would have thought with everything they did, they would have had more, but they managed to produce 200,000 items. I mean, that's a lot of manufacturing. That's a lot of just strength and endurance. Again, sometimes when you get, well, often when you get Mars and Saturn together in the same sign, there's almost this like workaholic energy or like athletic, because Mars is innovator and initiator, and Saturn is the endurance. So it's just like the Energizer Bunny. You know. Um, so yeah, a lot of energy in the seventh house. Then the eighth house here, the eighth house lord is Jupiter. It's also aspected by Mars and Mercury. So this is somebody who's constantly thinking and like researching their craft. Like how do we upgrade this? How do we make it better? That sort of thing. Then the ninth house here, the ninth lord is Saturn. Um, and Saturn has gone to the 10th house of day to day, kind of 9 to 5 work. And it's also aspected by an exalted moon. And Mars is aspecting here, which will be debilitated, and then Jupiter as well. So the ninth house is like, heads of state, politics. So this is his, with the ninth lord going to the 10th house, this is his kind of sponsorship or patronage by the empire. I mean, his first big, I think, commission was 1882 after he won that Pan-Russia jewelry exhibition. The Russian Empress ordered cufflinks from him with cicadas on it. I guess cicadas are maybe were a symbol for good luck or wealth or something. And then in 1885, he gifted his first Faberge egg, and then that became an annual family gift for not only the empress, but I think when the emperor changed his mother, so the Faberge eggs just rolling into the empire. And that happened until the October Revolution. So that was a nice steady stream of political patronage for him and his work. Um, then the 10th house, we have the Swa, Saturn. So it's going to be a lot of bureaucracy, but a lot of endurance as well, and working with land, earth, stone, because Saturn represents those things. So, precious metals and precious stones. Um, then the 11th house, the Lord is Jupiter. And, this is going to be, I think, a fairly lucrative career, winning the crowds. And then the 12th house Lord is Mars, aspecting its own sign with Mercury, K2, Venus. I've kind of mentioned this already. The family immigrated. He spent a lot of time abroad as a youth, did a world tour even, trained abroad. And then also, he fled in September of 1918 with the October Revolution in Russia. So I think they gave him like 10 minutes to grab whatever, and then he was out the door. And then within a couple years of 1918, he passed away, I think, in Switzerland. So, and then the thing is, like, his whole factory and all the precious metals and some Fabergé eggs and, a bunch of stuff, all this that he had built up was like destroyed pretty much almost overnight. And at the time, I don't have this, shown here, but I did look at the transits for September 1918 to see what was going on. And he was going through Sati. So I mentioned in the last chart, um, Sati, or not the last chart, but the transit charts for this month, both the beginning and the ending of the month, is Sati. So a loss of some major support system. So it all like crashed and burned for him. So you can see, like, he also has a chart where it's like there was great wealth and abundance and also times of great dearth. Um, so yeah, so his life ended when he was going through Sati. The other thing is that the transits in his lugna, so going through Taurus, he had K2 in Taurus, and then Saturn was aspecting Taurus. So he basically had Saturn and K2 in the lugna when all this went down with the October Revolution and, everything in his life kind of crashing and burning. So, yeah, so pretty intense chart, but you can see like the sun in Rohini, can bring a lot of good and opulence and wealth and beautiful things. So that's something to, I think, look forward to at the end of the month. So Peter Carl Faberge. Okay, then we have Mercury here, but on May 10th, Mercury enters Aries and Ashwini simultaneously. It's a neutral sign for Mercury. It's a movable fire sign, so Chara Agni, as I've been mentioning, a lot of actions and activity. And so there's going to be a lot of mental activity. It's going to conjoin an exalted sun and combust Venus. So again, healing with words to bring about positive new cycles. I've mentioned that a few times. Also ending the K2-5-9 aspect, decreasing chaos in the physical world because K2 is aspecting all the earth signs. May 21st, Mercury enters Bharani nakshatra. So this can be like new dialogues. They may not be the most effective. This might be like an attempt at negotiations. I think that energy is going to get better for success along those lines, like towards the end of the month, the beginning of June. May 27th, Saturn has a direct aspect on Mercury. So this might be the ending of talks, or at least an old way of discussion or policies and stuff like that, old writings. Um, because things, the negotiations that are going underway. May 29th, Mercury enters Krittika nakshatra. So this could be a big time of writing, and especially writing new policies, especially since Saturn just aspected Mercury. So old writings ending, old policies endings, and writing a new script here, either dialogue or policies. Then May 31st, Mercury enters Taurus. So Venus is going to be there. I think Sun is in Rohini by that time. So, Mercury, so all the things Mercury represents, like students and learning and schools and writing, communication, travel, that should be getting kind of rebuilding in very tangible, practical ways. And then, but the thing is, with Mercury going to Taurus, you're going to start getting K2 aspecting 5 and 9 again. 5 and 9 houses away again. So you might get kind of a new wave of chaos. I'm guessing this is going to be pushed back to the above because not everybody's going to be happy with, even though current, main parties have agreed on something. Not everybody's going to be happy with, what's the new derivation of policies and stuff that seems like it's coming through. Okay. Then the moon, I don't typically go into too much detail on the moon. In my monthly transit videos, I do separate videos on those, so those will be coming up. On May 7th, there's a new moon or Amavasya in Aries or Mesha. This is going to be in Bharani, Nakshatra. So again, movable fire sign, Chara Agni. It's a neutral sign for moon. This is going to be conjoined with an exalted sun, a combust Venus and Jupiter. Hold on, let me just check. No, Jupiter won't be here. I need to remove that. Conjoined with an exalted sun, a combust Venus, and aspected by a swa Saturn. So again, there's a lot of hidden feelings here. It's very emotional because you have Venus and Moon here. And I think, again, this is going to be about changes with work and administration because people have not been happy with the way things have been handled. Then May 23rd, there's going to be a full moon in Scorpio Vrishika. This is going to be an Anuradha nakshatra. This should be pretty nice. So again, at the end of the month, a nicer energy. Anuradha is a nakshatra that's all about victory, but by building bridges and building alliances. So again, towards the end of the month, you're going to see things, I think, coming together more. Scorpio is a fixed water sign, so sterajal, so long-held emotions. It's going to be neutral for the moon. And the moon is debilitated there, but you do have the aspect of Saturn, Sun, compass, Venus, Jupiter, all in Krittika. So again, there's this like, how do we bridge this like fighting and nurturing energy? How do we move things forward into a better space and time? Venus and Jupiter are going to be in planetary war at the time. So even though there's stuff going down, it looks like overall there's going to be a positive moment here, deep emotional transformation, coming to a favorable agreement of various parties, rebuilding of alliances after devastation, and figuring out a best way to move forward. So again, that's going to be nicer energy towards the end of the month. Okay, so one last chart here. This is the chart, the sun rising chart for New Amsterdam. So we all know New Amsterdam today is New York City. But it was funny because this popped up, and I guess New York City's been on my mind because I live close to New York City, and I've been watching a little bit of the like student protests and stuff like that. And so I don't know, I was like looking for, you know, birth charts of people. I usually start there. And then for some reason, my mind went to like Columbia University because that's been kind of the main school that's been, at least in the news here, that's been highlighted in terms of the student protests going on in New York City. The students occupied a building and the police were called in and all this sort of thing. And then, so I started thinking about New York City and Columbia University. And also, what was interesting is the day that they stormed the building at Columbia University was like the anniversary, like 59th or 60th year anniversary of some protest that went on in the 70s, I guess, 60s or 70s, and so I was just sort of like, I don't know, for some reason I was sort of drawn into that. So, and I was like, okay, well, let's just start with New York City and see where this goes. But this is, I think, pretty interesting, both as a chart and also as a history. So hopefully you'll find it to be so also. So this chart, the day is May 20th, 1624. I don't have a birth time. And this is New York City, New York, or Manhattan, New York. Um, and this date of 1624 was actually on the seal of New York City. So it was changed because some newer documents were found, and they found that this was the founding date, correct founding date. So 1624 is now on the seal of New York City. Manhattan, which is the island of Manhattan, which is the primary kind of center of New York City, um, came from the word Manhattan, from the indigenous Indian population of Muncie or language of Muncie, which is translated as place for gathering wood for bows. So I thought that was interesting because, again, nature here, and you'll see nature coming up in this chart, which might be surprising, but you'll see why. Gathering wood, so a place to get a lot of wood, which I don't think anywhere in Manhattan is a place that you would go to get a lot of wood, but back then it was. And then bows, again, there's this energy of fighting, right? Yeah. So we'll see plenty of that in this chart. Sun nakshatra, Rohini, a lot of attraction. The moon nakshatra, hard to say. It was either in Ardra or Punarvasu. So Ardra could be sadness. Punarvasu could be like leaving home, having a home base and going out and coming back. I could see either one in this chart. I'm not quite sure. I think it was split, almost half the day in one, half the day in other. Either one I think could work in this chart. The day lord, you know, probably the moon if it was after 4:30 in the morning. Before our lord, I don't know, because we don't have an exact birth time. The birth to Shah was Rahu or Jupiter. So Rahu, let me see, Rahu is in Hasta. So Rahu is ambition, and Hasta is symbolized, the nakshatra symbolized by hand. So it's about grabbing things. Yeah, an ambition to grab things. And that was definitely this moment in time. Jupiter is in Maga nakshatra. So Maga um, is symbolized by a throne. So this is a government move to grab control. Um, and so the reason why this day was important was on this day, May 20th, 1624, the Dutch government of the time, I think they called it the Dutch Republic, sent 30 families to inhabit the island of Manhattan to basically stake their claim. This territory, this piece of land was theirs. Okay. And that's this day and time. Okay. But you can see, like, so as I go through this, I think it's fairly clear that you can, even though that this is what, 400 years ago. Yeah, this year. Wow, look at that. 400 years ago. 400 years ago. And what, 23 weeks or something. Um, that even though this birth chart is 400 years ago, you can see how the energies were true then and they are true now. Yeah. So anyway, so ambition, government, wealth. These are the things already we can see from what we've talked about so far. The other thing is that again, I one of the reasons why I chose this chart was not just because I'm like reading the papers about the student protests in New York City, but it kind of brought me there. But look, Sun and Mercury in Taurus, we're going to experience that this month. Venus in Aries, currently. Mars in touching or influencing Gemini and Virgo. Yes. Saturn aspecting Aries, debilitated there. Yes, so we've been talking about that. Rahu and Ketu on the Virgo Pisces axis, even though they're reversed, but they're still going to cause chaos in those houses. And we have a Kala Sarpa yoga, so ambition, and we have Sati Sati again. So a loss of long-term support system. So you can see how this chart like really brings all the things I've been talking about together. All right, so let's start at the top. Surya Lagna again, Taurus Vrishabha, because it's a sun rising chart, fixed earth signs, your Prithvi, Sun and Rohini, a lot of beauty coming here. We have Combust, Mercury, and Krittika. So this could be like writing. It could also be business. And we have an aspect by Rahu and stuff. So this is a ambitious move, business move by the government to grab the goods. Essentially, you could see it that way. So this is like a business transaction. You could see it that way with the Mercury there and the Rahu, Hasta, ambition. This is also an intellect, you could potentially see this. I don't know if you would see it as intellectual property, but definitely like a mental move to grab control of things, and grabbing control of government, ideas, land. And again, it's like, how do we work this? Are we going to fight for it? Are we going to nurture it? Basically, what they did was they sent 30 families to just like, literally like inhabit the land and take it over. And the other thing is that a trading company was formed here, which you could, see because again, we've seen in all three charts, not only is Sun in Taurus, but Venus, the Lord of um, Taurus, has gone to the 12th house of, you've seen it, international trade, right? International sales, international business, which you've seen with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's chart, and you've seen also with Faberge's, right? Peter Carl Faberge's. So you can see the similarities, but then we'll also see the differences here. Um, so the other thing that's interesting is you have Rahu aspecting the Lugna here. So Rahu is all about like, deception and hidden things and stuff like that. And I was reading about the history here of this time. Apparently, one Native American tribe sold the land to the Dutch for like the equivalent in 2012 of like $1,100. Can you imagine selling like Manhattan for $1,100 in 2012? I mean, people would be like in an uproar. Anyway, I thought that was funny, but the thing is, the tribe that sold the land didn't actually own the land. It was free. So it was like one Indian tribe, Native American tribe, selling another, basically hoodwinking the Dutch, or they thought they were hoodwinking the Dutch. The Dutch thought that they were hoodwinking the Native Americans, and it was working both ways. It was I was like, wow, like it's like a double whammy of like deception here. The Lugnacious Venus, and it's gone to the 12th house. So, and Venus represents things like people and comforts and nature and diplomacy. And the thing is, not only was the ships landed there, but as just for the ships to land there, I'm sure there were people that lost along the way as they were crossing the Atlantic Ocean. So, and the other thing is that this was not um, this was probably more diplomatic way of taking over the land than like showing up with a bunch of, I don't know, weapons, because we don't have Mars here. But what did they do? I mean, they traded land for things like shells, which for the Native Americans were, wampum, because for Native Americans that was considered like a currency. beads that you could wear around your neck. It's almost like trading diamonds and pearls, sort of, in a way. Um, Also, the trading company was for mostly beaver pelts, so it was mostly a fur trading company. And so, again, Venus can represent things like animals and things like that in nature. And the pelts were highly desirable. Beavers are highly desirable because you could create like a water-resistant, waterproof hats, I guess is what they use them for. And there were some secretions from the beavers that they used in perfumes. So it was interesting because the beaver trading situation was what interested the Dutch here. But you can see it's like hats, fashion, and clothing, and perfumes, and this is all like comfort, exotic comforts, exotic comforts, which Venus in the 12th house can represent. Okay. Um, And it was, there was still some diplomacy, maybe not as much. I mean, even there was deception here. It was probably better than a big blowout war because, there was always like a lot of warring going on between different Native American tribes and then different Native American tribes with Europeans and stuff like that. So you can see all that here. Then the second house lord is Mercury with Moon and Mars, probably both in Ardra. So there was a lot of sadness here. The second house of family, wealth, um, what is it? Speech. But you would potentially benefit with this Mars and Moon in the um, second house. You would benefit from people. You would benefit from land. There would potentially be attacks on wealth and land. But since Ardra's here, there's also eventually, when New Amsterdam turns into New York City and modernizes, this is going to be advancements through electricity. What do they call it? In New York's the city that never sleeps because there's always sunlights on somewhere, right? I mean, you can't really see the sky too well because there's so much light pollution and stuff like that. But this could also be like attacks, like, Mars can represent enemies, and their enemies were like other European nations coming through there, like France and England, and then the Native Americans. So, this was not a steady place. Yeah. Then the third bhava here, the third house, the third lord is Moon. We have Saturn and Aslesha. So again, more, Aslesha symbolized by a snake. So this could be like a sudden public edict. The third house also represents a written document. So some sudden public edict coming through saying, okay, if we show up with 30 families, then this land officially becomes ours. I don't know the laws at the time, but apparently that's how it worked. This could also be like a shocking end to neighbors. And literally, this could be, especially when the Europeans showed up, this could be like the Native Americans getting sick from all these germs and bacteria and things that came over, that they carried over with them from Europe. So a lot of Native Americans perished because of that. Okay, so yeah, so shocking end to neighbors. Fourth house, and you'll see too, like you see, like there's a lot of conflict here, even though like on the surface, like in the Lugna, there is this like ambition with Rahu there, but there's also this kind of like deception in a way. And again, I love New York City, so I don't want to demean the town or the city in any way, but there's a truth to that. There's like there's a like a when you walk through the streets in New York City, it's very impressive, and you're like, wow, look at these huge skyscrapers, and you walk down certain streets, and you're like, wow, look at all this wealth and all this, all these luxury goods and stuff like that. But the thing is that New York City's probably for most people, not if your wish or goal or dream or ambition is to have a nice, gentle, peaceful, quiet life, cozied up with friends and family. That's not really the New York City dream. Usually people going to New York City are all about the big dream, the big ambition, making it big, making their name. Not always, but there's a lot to at least, the image of it is that. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what it's known for, and that's the Lugna here. But you also see that there's a lot of like there's not so much socializing here. Like this Saturn in the third house of neighbors and stuff like that. Like most of the people I know who live in New York are not, it's not true. I'm sure it's not true for everybody because there's almost, what, 10 million people who live in New York City, but it's not considered the friendliest place. So, generally speaking, I'm sure there are exceptions to that. But it's it's sort of known that, like, you don't know if you ask a stranger on the street for directions if they'll help you or not. I mean, I've always been helped, so but I don't. Other people complain about New York City not being very friendly. So um, anyway, so again, I'm just trying to go back and forth between 1624 and then again today, because again, we're getting on the 400-year anniversary of New York City, which I didn't realize until I just started talking. So it's kind of funny. But the fourth bhava here, the fourth lord is the sun in Rohini, Jupiter in Maga. So a lineage of royals, wealth, and beauty. I mean, if these European nations had this amount of money to spend on voyages and sending families, 30 families, I mean, those must have been, I'm guessing, fairly big boats with a lot, setting them up. I mean, that's not cheap. Then the fifth house lord is Mercury, Rahu, Saturn, Mars. Well, you tell me. We've been talking like Faberge's chart. Saturn and Mars together. Manufacturing, Rahu, ambition, Mercury, mind. So mind to manufacture, public presence, which is essentially what they did. I mean, they just like, essentially dropped off 30 families. And like, okay, we're here. This is ours. But you can also see like this being like, putting New York City on the map. The fifth house, the natural fifth house is Leo. So it's a stage. It's like, okay, we're marking our territory. This is ours. This is like a real thing now. And then over time, Saturn, Mars, Rahu, ambition with steel and concrete, that's skyscrapers. And that's, what a lot, just on the surface, what New York is known for. But then we also have the mind here. So this is all, very much about let's say, by design, not haphazard. It was by design. Yeah. Then the sixth house here, the sixth house lord, we have a Venus aspecting its own sign. So this is winning over enemies with diplomacy and charm. Again, the wampum, like, shells. They bought Manhattan with shells. I mean, it's almost laughable now, but but that's also part of the city. I mean, there's a charm to it. I mean, there's wild ambition there. But there's also there's a charming aspect to it, especially like if for me, I really love the kind of older buildings from about 100 years ago. I mean, those sorts of buildings and stuff, I don't even know if they could build anymore because they're just too expensive. And even like people I know, like public, what do they call it, civil engineers who like build the roads and stuff. Like whenever I walk through New York, I'm a walker. I'm a big walker everywhere I go, and I've walked a lot of places in the world. And for some reason, New York streets just completely kill my legs. And I never understood why. Like no matter what kind of shoes I wear, it just kills my legs. And so finally, I talked to a civil engineer, and I said, "What is? There must be something different about New York streets." Because streets just wear my body down. I don't know how people walk those streets every day, because even just a few days there, and I'm sort of a wreck. And this guy was telling me that they have this super special reinforced concrete that just won't give because it's so expensive to put the streets in even once. That they almost make it so that they'll never have to do it again because not only the expense of the materials and the labor, but then shutting down traffic in those areas because it's so congested and all the businesses or whatever else going on. It's just a nightmare and way too expensive on different fronts. So Um, but again, people are drawn, it's like moths to a flame, right? I mean, if you got that ambition gene, boy, New York City is probably on your map, I'm guessing. For a lot of things like arts and culture and, intellectual endeavors, Wall Street, I mean, if you're not ambitious, it's probably not a place for you. I mean, unless you, maybe you're sponsored by ambitious people or something like that. Um, all these other ambitious people are. Um, then the seventh house here, the seventh house lord is Mars. And the seventh house is aspected by Sun and Mercury. So, and again, the seventh house with Taurus Lugna is Scorpio. So, a lot of transformation of lofty ideals. And actually, very quickly, within a year of them establishing, dropping off the 30 families here, 30 Dutch families here, within a year, New Amsterdam became the capital for the region, the territory. So that's a pretty quick, like, okay, it's ours and now we're in charge, not just of the city, but of the territory. I mean, it's like wild, like that's a really quick ascension. Then the eighth house here is ruled by Jupiter, aspected by Mars. Jupiter's aspecting its own sign, and then we have Mars and Moon here. So this is like government philosophy of public land we could get here. How do we claim this as our own? Uh, that's what's going on here. That's the deep kind of psychology or reasoning for this action. Then the ninth house here, the ninth lord is Saturn. It's aspecting its own. You also have an exalted Mars and Rahu. So ambition, drive, never stopping, workaholism. Yeah, very ambitious, effective government, especially controlling land, manufacturing, and this was an extension of the Dutch Republic. And also there was some religious, at least in the beginning, some religious connotations or, aspect to developing the land. But you can see that like Venus is off in the corner here. And Jupiter is here, but you can see that like there's a lot of, again, we're seeing over and over again, Sun, Mars, so the two leadership planets, Saturn, Mars, manufacturing, Rahu, ambition, and Moon, public. You can see that this is, again, a lot of ambition, a lot of drive, but a lot of more like business and manufacturing. This whole chart is a lot more, I would say, transactional than like warm and fuzzy. I mean, yes, there's charm here, but it's kind of charmed, a weasel. Again, I love New York City. I don't mean to sound negative, but it's kind of like how to use your charms to draw the crowds to, fund your endeavors. This is how I kind of see this, yeah. Um, yeah. So then the 10th house lord is Saturn, aspected by Jupiter. So again, we're like establishing a very wealthy government here. 11th bhava, 11th house, 11th lord is Jupiter. And we've got Ketu and Revati. So this is like a government ending overseas groups and hospitality. Again, kind of just squashing the skirmishes and saying, okay, this is ours. Now you need to respect it. And we draw a line and we own this and, we're in charge and, back off. Like that's essentially what this move was. And then 12th house here, I've been essentially talking about the Lord is Mars, and we've got Venus there. It's aspected by Saturn and Jupiter. So this is actually, quite a bit of loss of life, like literally human life from the voyages and also I'm sure life was not easy for the Europeans coming over and then the Native Americans who got sick from the Europeans. So there's a lot of loss of human life, also animals and nature. Because again, even though we start off with Manhattan, the place to go gather wood, there is not much wood to be gathered now, 400 years later, because again of all this ambition and drive, and we want manufacturing and steel and skyscrapers. energy that was present even in the beginning. It just didn't look like that because there wasn't that then, but came about, partly because of cities like this. It was also a rescue mission. Yeah, yeah, because Venus is an Ashwini, so it was attempting to salvage the goods here, and the goods were again exotic things like beaver skins and for hats, and their gland secretions for perfumes, and also not too long after this, only 40 years later, again talking about this transactional quality to this whole chart. The Dutch traded Manhattan to England. Like England invaded it and they took it over, and the Dutch didn't really oppose them. But they negotiated because of laws. They traded Manhattan for Suriname and the Spice Islands because of the spices and the sugar that were grown there. So, and this is again this Venus in the 12th house. So, luxury goods, exotic spices, this is all Venus stuff. Hats, perfume, hats, fashion, Venus. Sugar itself, that's a processed, a plant mix. Foods that are Venusian are, processed, highly processed foods because they're so refined. That takes a lot of energy. I mean, today we don't even think about it because we're, flooded with like, white sugar and white flour, but that's all Venus stuff. So in the end, this even New Amsterdam, so even though all the commodity trading stuff that was going on in New York City, in New Amsterdam, it itself, New York City became a commodity. That's what I was saying at the end. I was like, wow. I mean, talk about full, you go around the whole chart, you're like, wow, how does that all come together like that? So yeah, this chart kind of blew me away, and there's more to it. So I got another, just hold on a second. Let me switch. Okay, so this is the same slide on the left, but the right has changed obviously with this photo. So when I was looking up at Wikipedia and looking at New Amsterdam and reading about the history, I found this photo, okay? And the article on Wikipedia is not that long, and there are only, I think, 25 historical type photos in the article, and this was one of them. Now look at this. This is the 1954 unveiling of an stained glass depiction of Peter Stuyvesant. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. He was the last Dutch colonial officer in New York before it was handed over to England. In Butler Library at Columbia University, which is like, the student protests at Columbia University were what initially got me thinking about Columbia University in New York. So the Columbia University was the epicenter of recent student protests. And see again, it's like full circle. And I was just sort of blown away by and you can see that the date changed here. So this was to commemorate the 300th anniversary. As I mentioned, that new documents surfaced that show that the founding date was at 1924. Or sorry, 1624. So that's why this 300th anniversary year is not correct in the description here. But also, again, it was a short article. There were only 25 pictures I counted, and this was one of them. And I was like, wow. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is kind of the wild part of like doing Jyotish sometimes is like you end up going down what you think is a rabbit hole, and then it comes back around. Um, full cycle. I mean, full circle. Not just in terms of the history of New Amsterdam, New York City, but also like bringing it to the current and even current news pages and stuff like that. And then also like just the date that the mismatching, the unveiling of the date. I mean, that's like Rahu in the Lagna. It's a hidden beginning, and so it took them what more than 300 years to find out what the real date was once they uncovered more documents and stuff like that. So it's just over and over again these different layers of the planets and the stars and everything. I don't know, this whole thing just kind of blew me away. So anyway, hopefully you appreciate that as much as I did, because I was just like, on so many levels, I just like innocently went down this path, and then look what came out of it. So anyway, again, if nothing else, if you're not as excited about that or blown away by that as I am, hopefully at least it's another chart for you to learn from and see how the current sky patterns, are potentially manifesting in the upcoming month. Okay, so I've been talking a lot about Aries, Mesha, and Taurus Vrishabha signs today. So those are going to be fairly active. So if you like to be your own astrologer, you can find out where those signs are in your chart. And again, if you use a North Indian style chart, the first house is this top diamond in the middle, and then you go backwards, second house, third house, fourth house, that sort of thing. So what you can do, what I've listed here are very, very basic symbolisms of the houses. So like, let's say you have Taurus in the fourth house. So you can follow, the planet stories I've been talking about through Taurus. So like Jupiter is going to be there, there now, and then Sun's coming, and then Venus and Mercury. And you can follow those signs. And the fourth house you would look at. Oh, I have on the next page. Let me check. Let me just pick a different house. Let's say you have Taurus in the third house of siblings. Okay, then you're probably going to get, with Jupiter there in the third house, you're going to get a lot of writing and a lot of like probably better energy with siblings and neighbors and classical arts, especially because you're going to have Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus um, in Taurus by the end of the month. Um, so you can kind of be your own astrologer, so you can get a little bit more information on how the transits are going to affect your life specifically. But as always, if you are your own astrologer, try not to freak yourself out. I get people who come in and are like, "Oh, my chart's like this and my chart's like that," and they're kind of got doom and gloom and their heart in their eyes, and it's really kind of sad for them and me. And it's like, well, no, look, there's some good stuff here, so sometimes a little information, can be dangerous, as they say. So just if you're looking at your own chart, take it with a grain of salt. Just learn what you can and try not to get, I don't know, too obsessed, I guess, with it. Just see what you see and take notes. So we have here on the slide a few bits of symbolism for different houses, the 1-7 axis or house for 1-7 bhava or house, then the 2-8 bhava or house, then the 3-9 bhava or house. And the thing is, you can get a lot more detail on the houses and bhavas if you look at my playlist, and because I have a video on most of the houses by now. Then on the next slide, I've got the other axes. So we have the 410 bhava house uh, axis. We have the 511 bhava house axis and the 612 bhava house axis. So again, just a few bits to keep it simple if you're learning. And if you want more details, I would go to the playlist for houses and bhavas. All right. So as always, another long one. I get so excited by Jyotish. Thanks for listening to part or all of this talk. If you made it to the end, congrats. I talked a lot today. Again, all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. You can find them all there. If you're looking for more birth charts, I would see my birth chart archive list 2024 video for a list of birth charts and the videos you can find them in. I do offer individual birth chart readings. I do those live on Zoom or in pre-recorded video. If you're interested in that, you can email heartlightastra@yahoo.com for more info. I have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about other Vedic arts such as Ayurveda and yoga, as well as other paradigms of natural medicine like homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care. Yeah, I think that's all of it. Always appreciate the support you give me and the channel by listening to talks, watching videos, all the different ways you support the channel, subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting, asking questions, making donations, all of it's appreciated. So thank you so much for that. Um, And yeah, as always, I hope you found this talk interesting, useful, and helpful to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. So have a good month, everybody, and until the next one, take care. Namaste.